So Austyn, thanks for coming on the show. I'm really excited to talk to you. How are you?
Doing great today, man. Life is on my own schedule. It's at a fast pace, but I'm excited to be here with you for sure.
Well, great to have you here. So I like to start with everybody. Tell me about how your quarterback story kind of started and began. What attracted you to the position at an early age? How did that all start for you?
Yeah, man. So I would say that, my uncle played quarterback in college. My dad, who was his identical twin, played wide receiver. They were both highly successful, both played in college. And so football kind of ran in the family. My parents exposed me to a ton of sports when I was young. And really, I realized that I loved competing first and foremost. And I loved the feeling of people relying on me more than other players. And I would say that that is what I tasted at the quarterback position in 7th grade in Pop Warner. And I would say that it wasn't even the love for ball, it was the love for the position and kind of a couple of those things that went with the position that it was over after that. And I was a multi-sport athlete my freshman, sophomore year of high school, but it was always football once I hit about 13, 14 years old.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, most kids really aren't that self-aware at that point. You know, you're just having fun being out there, being active and physical. So elaborate on that a little bit if you could. I mean, what was there one specific thing that really turned the light bulb on for you about playing the position and being in that leadership role?
Yeah, man. The only thing that's tough about these interviews is you have to talk about past accomplishments. And so I struggle with that from time to time. But for me, it was basically in 7th grade. The team that I was playing for was piss poor, to say the least, the year prior. And I got on the team, and there were multiple situations throughout the season where, one person never wins the game in the game of football, but I gave our team an opportunity to win. And it was that feeling that I remember, obviously through a less mature, less conscious lens at the time, but that was my addiction. I was addicted to having the ball every play. I was addicted to everybody looking at me in the huddle. I was addicted to getting those conversations with the coaches that nobody else really got. It were all those things that started young that definitely started it. And then, my dad taught me how to throw the ball naturally, probably far advanced compared to those that I was competing with. And so that was something that, I always felt was easy where other guys really struggled with it. So that's probably part of the love as well.
So let's fast forward a little bit here. You grew up in the Pacific Northwest and you ended up attending Wyoming to play college ball.
Yeah.
You started there as a true freshman.
Yeah.
You played really well, so well, in fact, that you earned Mountain West Conference Freshman of the Year honors in 2009.
Yeah.
But then after your sophomore year, you decided to transfer to Vandy.
Correct.
Why make a move when things seemed, at least, to be going so well for you?
100%. Do you want this answer through the lens now or through the lens at the time?
Well, give us both if you would.
All right, cool. The lens at the time, probably a little bit naive in the sense that I'm somebody who's chasing the best version of myself at all times. I've always been that way since I became conscious of it, which was probably about my senior year in high school. So when I got to college, I had a 3.8 GPA. As you said, I was a Mountain West Conference Freshman Player of the Year. And my play and my professionalism at the position continued to ascend. As a culture, we recruited the states of Florida, Texas, and California aggressively. It snows 8 months a year up there. So basically, when those guys didn't play early in their career, we were losing a lot of players. Our culture was fairly toxic at the time. And for me, it wasn't even all of that. It was that I felt capped. I felt that I could not push through a wall of growth, that I was being limited by my environment too. And so that's why, looking back in hindsight, had I started 4 years at a Mountain West school and done, what I was already doing, I would have gone to the NFL. And, so the road to Vanderbilt and the decision ultimately made that NFL part a lot less easy, but it gave me my life. And so looking back now, the only thing that I would say is I took it very personally, the way that coaches treated me in college while I was going through all of those things. I would say now in hindsight, as a coach, I completely understand why they treated me the way that they treated me. And so for me now, looking back, it's been a really, really cool thing, because not only do I not regret the decision, but I also have kind of forgiven everybody that was a part of that decision that kind of hurt me in that process, because there, make no doubt, I was hurt. I was hurt through that.
You kind of alluded to having some perspective now. Do you have any thoughts on the new upcoming transfer rules and what's going on right now in major college football? Because you've heard some prominent head coaches say, hey, if we see guys that are quick to transfer and doing it multiple times, we're not really going to take a look at them, because maybe that's an indication of them not being able to face adversity or handle adversity. Do you have any thoughts on that now from the coaching side?
Yeah, well, I think, in 2009, when I made this, 2010 was when I made the decision to transfer, Twitter barely existed. And so I remember getting my release blocked, and I couldn't put any pressure on the school because I had no public forum to go share what was going on. So now that's completely changed. So what I see with the transfer portal that I have an issue with is essentially, like, these are all reactionary things to try to make the collegiate athletes experience better. What we're underestimating is the average shelf life of a coach right now in college football is 2.3 years. So when you look at a collegiate athlete, when you choose to go to a school, you can expect to have a different head coach by the time you're done at that school. I think that's why I like the transfer portal, because you do have to have some liberating part of this that allows the kids some flexibility. I think the real tragedy that's going on right now is there's no education on it. And that's what I'm seeing. And while I was up there in the SEC with our guys, it's so easy the grass is greener on the other side, and just to enter into the transfer portal and not want to face your adversity. But a kid at 18, 19, 20, I don't really expect him to know that. I don't expect him to have that perspective. So I think the tragedy is in the education. Nobody is being educated on the percentages behind when a kid enters the transfer portal. We all hear about Justin Fields. Well, what about the other 60% that never play college football again, or go to a Division I AA school after being at a prominent Division I school? And there's nothing wrong with that, but now they're suffering through the issues of, all their friends and family and things, thinking that they're this type of player. And now, at least, in terms of perception, they're not any longer. And so I see a lot of issues happening for kids within that realm. And I think for me, it's more of the education behind the transfer portal and less the portal itself.
Yeah, it makes sense. Did you notice a difference in the level of play between the Mountain West and the SEC?
Oh my God.
Compare those two for me.
Yeah, I think there's only one stat that you need to know. I think my freshman year, I ran for something like 500 yards from scrimmage in the Mountain West. Felt flexibility back there while I was in the pocket. Felt I could extend plays. When we were top 25 in the country, and so we were getting people's best shot, and we were playing the likes of Jadeveon Clowney and all these guys, and you just can't get away from them. So I think I had negative 118 yards from scrimmage my senior year at Vanderbilt, and I had plus 500 as a freshman. So that's really the difference. Speed of the game at receiver and in the secondary, it exists, but it's the line play, man. It's just how fast things happen up front in that conference. It's a lot to deal with, that's for sure.
I have to ask you about the torn ACL. So I don't think I've ever heard of anybody playing with a torn ACL. You played 3 more games. You went 3-0, by the way.
Yeah.
Why didn't that setback end that season for you?
Yeah. I think it's a culmination of the entire story. So when I was blocked from my release in order to go directly to another college, I got offered a lot of scholarships that I couldn't take. I was forced to either choose to go to Division I AA or go to junior college and take 28 hours and graduate with an AA degree in 1 semester, which would then get me back to being able to go play Division I football. I had to walk on at Vanderbilt. I earned a full scholarship, then became the captain and starting quarterback. That journey alone and the adversity makes you very, very appreciative for any opportunity that you have. Then I lost my grandfather, who's my hero, on Tuesday of that Georgia week, and I tore my ACL on Saturday. I played that game for him. I remember laying on the field when I tore my ACL. I looked up at the sky, and I remember kind of an out-of-body experience where I just said to myself, like, he's up there and has lost his life. Like, this is a knee. This is a part of my body. And in that moment, I found a ton of strength. I had a bunch of teammates that cared about me. I had been through a lot. And so really, I actually segued into, I need to be here for my family right now. And so I went straight into the mode of being there for my dad and being there for my brother and sister. And I actually went and flew back, spoke at his funeral, then flew back to Vanderbilt. And the doctor looked at my knee and he was like, Austyn, you barely have any swelling in your knee. And I was like, okay, well, my ACL is torn though, right? And he's like, yeah, it's torn. But he's like, if you let your MCL repair, he's like, it's going to be hard and it's going to be painful, but you could have the opportunity to play on a torn ACL. And I was like, say less, dude, let's go. So at that point, you know, people ask me that question all the time. And I guess like I bring it full perspective and saying, I don't even think I found the strength within myself. I think it was the journey, my grandfather, my teammates, my coaches, that didn't really give me a choice. I wanted to do it, and that was giving me new life. And so I did it. And I think my grandfather had a lot to do with that. And so I think, you know, in times where we struggle, we have to lean on other things in order to push us through it a lot of the time. And I had a lot of other things that I was able to lean on in that moment.
Yeah. Total confidence in your abilities. That's really tough to come by under even perfect circumstances. Tell me about the internal conversations that you maybe had with yourself around that injury. There had to be a component of doubt, fear, pain, of course. How did you attack that, knowing that you weren't even close to 100%?
Yeah. You know, for me, I will answer the question more so with perspective from my freshman year as opposed to my senior year. Through the injury, that out of body experience where I had motivations that were pushing me, kept me away from the fear and the day. It hurt. It hurt. But you know, for me, it was new life. It was extra life. I would say that really applies to when I was a true freshman. I was ignorant, right? You're young, you're naive, and you're just playing the sport. And I had a lot of fun. And so, you know, I studied the mind a lot. And I would say I was in flow state, you know, 90% of the time that I was playing football. I was happy-go-lucky. I was enjoying what was going on. My senior year, and really my junior and senior year, James Franklin, amazing man, but very tough to play for at quarterback in the sense that you are an NFL quarterback. The decisions that you make are, you know, there is no 60-yard gain. That's a great thing if you missed the first read. You know, the first read is what it is. That's statistical and analytical success. And so I know that fear and frustration with myself really kicked in when I was a senior. Because I was no longer this happy, let's just go play, line me up anywhere and I'll do it. That kind of had fallen to the wayside. I was now more so a very analytical competitor. And so that's when I started to feel things like fear, to feel things like doubt. And that internal conversation started to change a little bit. And it was tough to remedy with that.
Did you learn anything about yourself from that injury?
Absolutely.
Maybe not right away, but maybe now that you've had time to reflect, how did you kind of change mentally after you went through that experience?
I think it was focus for me. You know, in life, you know, so many of us struggle with the past or the future, and anxiety plays such a factor in so much of our lives day to day nowadays. And for me, what I was able to do with all of those, you know, battles that I was facing was really channel all of that to stay one track minded. And so with the injury, like it was merely survival. And so as I'm thinking surviving and being able to play, it kept me very, very focused on one direct path. And I think that focus is what allowed me to not trip on a lot of other things that people typically trip on. And that's where I say, I don't know that I would have been able to tear my ACL and still be okay had I not lost my grandfather. What's really cool is I also don't think that I would have been able to handle the passing of my grandfather without having a torn ACL and kind of doing that for him. So we wonder why life does this stuff to us. And I've learned to just trust the plan. And for me, that was what I received from that experience, was the ability to trust that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's quite an amazing little story within your career there. Elaborate on James Franklin a little bit. He was your head coach of Vandy, now the head coach of Penn State. What was it like? I'll ask it this way. What was the one big takeaway that you can tell me about in playing for James Franklin?
Yeah, the man knows people to the extent of which I've never seen anybody before. He understands the pulse for his team. He understands the pulse for his coaches. He understands the pulse of the players, each individually as well, to a level that is beyond anything I've ever seen before. So as he's having conversations and dialogue with us, his coaches, and the team, he understands how we're all feeling. So he knows what buttons to push. And the thing that really makes Franklin is it's genuine. He actually does care about you. And I think that was the thing that separated him. He has a master's in psychology. He has an undergrad in psych. A lot of the ploys and things that he would put in place with our team, I would laugh, because while he was doing it, I kind of had an understanding of what he was trying to do. And he was
just studied it in class a couple hours earlier.
Just studied it in class. But my grandfather, who I just spoke of, he was the top sports psychologist in all of California. And I actually wanted to take over his practice. When he passed away, that's what sent me on the road of coaching, which was practical psychology, along with that injury and me coaching my team in preparation for the bowl game. So lots of stuff in a roundabout way, but with Franklin specifically, that's his inner genius. You know, he lives it. He's a 24/7, 365 attention to detail type of person, but it is his ability to understand people and connect with them and care for them, and then ultimately inspire them. That is what I got to watch, that especially after the experience at my prior college, I was like, okay, so this is how it's done. This is how it's done at the highest level.
Yeah. I've always had an interest in psychology myself, kind of this thought of why we do what we do.
Exactly.
And it sounds like, you know, well, I know that you pursued and received your degree in psychology from Vandy. Where did you originally develop that interest? Was it from your grandfather?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was with my grandfather. I would say that the history of men within my family have all been very caring, have supported the community a lot. So big hearts. So that came to me very easily. But it was my conversations with him where I would hit roadblocks, talk to my parents, who are amazing support systems and very smart, and still was just kind of talking through the emotion of those roadblocks. And then as I would speak to him, he always had a way to pivot from that and kind of take a more proactive approach to attacking those fears, insecurities, doubts, whatever they were. And so at that point, you know, I knew that I liked it, and I didn't like school much. And so psychology was something that I felt was practical. So while I was actually studying the content, I was learning things in my life. And so that was something that drew me to it. And then again, in my experience, preparation for bowl game, while I had surgery, I was able to transition into a coaching role. And at that time, I lost my grandfather, so I could no longer take over his practice. And while I was working with our younger players was when I realized I had a special ability within the psychological realm to connect and ultimately inspire athletes.
So I'm assuming that led to, or at least played a part in your role on the Missouri staff as the director of culture and character development. Talk about that a little bit, if you would, and how all those things kind of tied together.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, you could say it this way, is at 24 years old, as a recruiting graduate assistant and transitioning into being a recruiting coordinator at Missouri, I knew I wanted to leave college football. I knew that it did not support kind of ethically how I'm aligned in my values and principles. I was limited in terms of the impact that I could have. So I was very concerned about that. So I essentially, and no one knows this, but I tried to leave Missouri 3 times, of which I was met with basically a promotion. So I was promoted to recruiting coordinator, director of recruiting, quarterback coach. And then I was about to leave as a quarterback coach. And he asked me, what can I do to pay you more? What can I do to make you happy? And I said, honestly, I'd love to put in a plan for our entire athletic program, our entire football program, coaches included, to really dive into this personal development side. I said, our kids need it. We need it. We need to understand them better. And so he said, okay, Austyn, if that's what you want to do, then I need to see the plan. And so I laid the plan out for him, multiple exercises, speakers, connecting with alumni, kind of really taking it through the realm of psychology and going through the steps. And we put that program in place. And, we had one guy leave in the transfer portal over a 1.5-year span, despite facing bowl sanctions. We had our highest team GPA for 3 consecutive semesters. It was some special stuff that happened. And that was where the inspiration really formed to then finally say, it's time to go take this to the world.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Did you talk a little bit about how you think or how prevalent that concept is now within major college athletic departments now? Have you seen it change since you began that program at Missouri?
Not near enough. I mean, it is starting to become conversation, but this is where you get into the issue of masculinity and just within sports, what that term means and what that term looks like. I would define toughness as knowing yourself to such a depth and degree that when adversity faces you, you know how to respond to push through those moments. If we do not ever dig within ourselves, being vulnerable, to figure out how we think in those moments, essentially, we're in a very, very tough situation where we're playing roulette and hopefully it works out. So I think we are seeing some things societally that are allowing men to feel a little bit more comfortable sharing some of the things going on mentally for them, but not near enough. And that's what I want to accelerate. And this is something that people are very surprised by when they talk to me. It's not a shot at coaches. It's not a shot at the NCAA. It is an ever-growing level of anxiety within this generation due to the heavy prevalence of technology and a heavy period of affirmation that is creating issues that have not been seen to this degree ever before. And so they're trying to react to that. And in order to react to that properly, it would take a tenderizing of everybody within the realm of athletics. And there's a lot of, your old school natured coaches and people who don't quite understand what that means or its importance.
Wow, that was a lot to unpack right there. So how do you think, in your opinion, how do you balance the old school mentality with what needs to take place in order for these young guys to be successful? And I imagine that from the old school perspective, there's a lot of fear around the unknown from those guys. So how do you think, and how much time do you think it would take to kind of start to blend those two worlds a little better?
I think it's going to take a while. Yeah. But the recipe to get there is not so difficult. But actually doing it is what is difficult. So, this is something that I've discussed many times, where think of a coach who is now making $1 million coaching in the SEC, who has never had to worry about any of these things. And in his development as a coach, where he was in the pursuit of mastery as a coach, he didn't have to learn these things. Now he's here. He's on the back end of his career. This is everything I worked for. I'll have a GA do that stuff, right? Like, that is kind of the mentality that they grow into, and it's deserved to a certain extent. But now you say, hey, we have different athletes now, and we have to change our messaging. Well, that's changing them as a coach. And if you have $1 million in the bank account, that's a tough change to make for a lot of these guys. And so again, open-mindedness to truly coming down to the level of 15 to 22-year-olds and getting a deep understanding of what's actually at work. Because people within the psychological context can tell you till they're blue in the face what's going on. But until you feel that from all of your kids, the kids that you care about, it's just very hard to want to embrace change at that level. And I think that's the fight that we're kind of facing.
Yeah. Talk to me about the idea of purpose. You seem to know very early on that you wanted to coach, which is really to teach, to give back, to help in some way. How much does having an impact play a role in what you want to accomplish in your own life personally?
Yeah, I think it has a huge role. I think that I'm very blessed to have been in a realm that allows me, my passion is the human mind. So my involvement in sports, had it been 4 years smooth sailing at Wyoming, would not be equipped to deliver this type of conversation. My purpose was born in me chasing my best self and being resilient through that. And I needed support from my parents and people around me to support me in the moments where maybe I didn't have the strength myself. But when you go through this, which is the gift of the quarterback position, it is so difficult to take the praise and criticism that you receive and treat them the same way, that essentially I had to learn who I really was and who I really wanted to be. And so I already knew what my passions were, but I think my purpose was born in my struggle and in my adversity. And then you start to watch kids going through the same things that you went through. And now it's a calling. And you know, what I always say about your purpose is purpose pulls you, like it pulls you to it. It's not, hey, Austyn, you've started Locked In, you're changing a lot of things, you're doing all these things. Wow, like you're amazing. No, if you'd have been through the things I went through in life and you'd experienced the things I went through and then watched what I watched, you'd be doing the same thing. And so that's where I take a lot of the special nature of the way that I am away from me. Of course, I deserve some credit in this, but there was a long list of things that set me up for this. And so I would tell anybody chasing their purpose to ultimately just chase their best self in whatever direction they feel it is now. And eventually on that chase, we will naturally pivot in other directions. And at different times, as we pivot, something will happen that will birth their purpose. And that's what I think it is. And so the word that I break it down with purpose is intentionality. Like, are we being intentional about trying to be our best and follow who we really are? Or are we just kind of going through it or taking on the narrative of maybe what our parents say we should do or what someone else says we should do? I can tell you, you won't find your purpose in that.
Right. How are you using all of that knowledge that you've accumulated in applying that to the quarterback development company that you've created, LockedIn QB? I mean, give me one or two specific examples and some of the results that you've seen through that. Well,
so we look at quarterback as the position historically as a very mechanical position. I look at the position as artistic. I believe that as you tap into artistry, that is basically a simultaneous mind and body working together in what we're doing. That means that we have to be bulletproof both on and off the football field. So mechanics are easy. And that's something that I lay out. Let's not overdo this. Let's not overthink this. Okay. But in order to not overdo this or overthink this, there's this other side of us that we have to have complete. That's self-identity. That's understanding our values. That's understanding ultimately our goals and the direction that we're pursuing. That's understanding that goals and outperforming those goals is the foundation of confidence, which is what we call self-transcendence. And so really putting those things together, using the exercises that I used with the players at the University of Missouri, you know, some of them didn't work. A lot of them did work. What worked well with Drew Lock? What worked well with Kelly Bryant? What were they like, this didn't really work? Like now taking those things, imparting them in, and then the big thing that no one knows that I can't wait to let out here, and I'm about to let out here in a public setting in just a second as well in the next couple of weeks, is football is just my vehicle. Quarterback is just my vehicle. I know that I have the most credibility within that space. I have coached, obviously, very high-level quarterbacks, did it myself. And what I find fascinating about the psychological realm in general is people don't like to listen to psychologists. People don't like to listen to doctors talking about the mind. But I've noticed the moment you take somebody that is credible in an area that people are interested in, and then birth the conversation about the mind and about psychology, people are all in, because they think there's no way that Austyn would be bringing this up unless it wasn't incredibly important to what he accomplished through his athletic career. And so LockedIn QB is definitely, the brand, but I'm using the vehicle of quarterback to essentially tap into everything else. And that's what's starting to be felt. And I have about 5 levels to this all in my head right now that I've been crystallizing for years that are coming. And that's the coolest part. People are excited about what they see, and they have absolutely no clue the layers to this and where we're going.
That's exciting stuff. So what habits or concepts, I guess, have you incorporated into your own personal growth?
Yeah. So for me, there's, biohacking, right, in our lives, and doing anything that we can do to ultimately optimize ourselves. I think what's really important is first to accept that these are all ways just to remain more consistent in terms of how we feel. So I want to be in this brain state where I am inspired, where I'm motivated, and where I'm moving. And basically the optimization process are all little things that I can do to enhance the ability to stay consistent on that track. So things that I've done is, like, I went vegan for 8 months straight. I had no intention of being vegan. I just wanted to learn dietarily what felt good and what didn't. So what I learned through that process was milk, cheese, ice cream, those things, dairy in general, inflame my stomach. I didn't like it. Whey protein, inflame my stomach. I didn't like it. So now I'm all vegan protein powder. I still eat chicken. I still eat steak, but now it's 1 meal a day, because I realized if I eat it multiple meals a day, my body really struggles to keep up with that, because it takes longer to break down those proteins. So that, sleep optimization, lights off, particular temperatures, reading, journaling, these are all things that I've imparted into my life, where essentially just habitually, and that's the beautiful thing about habits, right, is they just become habitual. As you are intentional about them, they become intentional and habitual. And so now I'm at a point in my life where a lot of my process just happens. It's just what I do. And I think that in the optimization world, especially within the dietary element, and, getting up and moving in the mornings, and not so big into meditation, although I find it very practical at different times. Journaling is active meditation for me. Sometimes sitting in a room and just thinking about everything, especially with what I'm doing and how many different things I have going on, can be a little bit chaotic and a little bit overwhelming. So writing out how I'm feeling and writing out those things, like, it's just an easier way to talk to myself. So learning those things through this it's been awesome, man, over the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think 90% of what we do is fueled or driven by the subconscious mind as opposed to the conscious mind.
Love that.
Is there one thing that somebody can do to improve themselves that would apply to every single person, or is it more of a function of figuring out what your thing is? And on top of that, you mentioned some good habits that you possess. How do you break away from bad habits that might be a part of your daily routine?
Yeah, so you have to replace bad habits with other habits that help you to a certain extent. So you have to replace bad habits with good habits. So that connection in and of itself was something that's been very healthy for me. As you go through, your process of building these habits and optimizing, it is very unique to the individual. It's also just taking shots and being willing to know, I might journal for a month and a half, and I might decide after those 45 days, like, I don't ever want to journal again. There's been multiple things that I've done like that. So kind of a test trial mindset to all of it to find ultimately what works for you, I think is extremely important. But if there's one thing, especially in today's world, I think it's that people do not want to look at the fact that they are flawed. People do not want to dig into their fears. People do not want to my favorite quote in life is, "The cave you fear holds the treasure you seek." And I think that for people, if you wake up every day and as you experience thoughts that are scary or fearful or self-deprecating, really going to the nth degree of asking yourself where that's coming from and being vulnerable with yourself and tenderizing yourself to understand it. And ultimately, I think that comes from understanding that we're all going through it. And I think that that's the biggest thing, is just people being honest with themselves. And when I started to become extremely accountable to myself is when the needle moved. Up until that point, I was a victim, and I had a lot of excuses and reasons, and I'm still a victim at times. But when I'm able to call myself out for that victimhood, that's what allows me to grow from it.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I recently became aware of a stat that only 1 out of 10 people pursue any type of personal development, but 10 out of 10, they all want to be happier. And the two things are very related. So it's when you see those numbers in black and white, it really reiterates what you just said.
100%. I like that.
So you mentioned flow state a little earlier. I think about this quite often.
Yeah.
I want to be in that state as much as possible, as I'm sure that you do. And I experienced some of it earlier today, but there are certain days where I just cannot get anywhere near it. When you are having a day like that, is there one thing that flips the switch for you that gets you back moving in the right direction towards at least some semblance of that flow state?
So by being conscious of what flow state is and when we're in flow state, that helps us understand when we're out of it and why we're out of it. So then you try to build in a few things that maybe pull you closer to being back in flow state. I think the hardest part for everybody, and the hardest part for myself, is ultimately acceptance. Understanding, hey, like, I didn't sleep well the last 3 nights. So the fact that I'm pissed off today has everything to do with what's happened the last 3 nights, not me feeling bad right now. So I think that that's something that just accepting that and understanding that is a huge part of not getting self-deprecating in this world and not thinking that this is, some hoaxy, invisible stuff. Flow state in and of itself is when we're performing optimally and when our arousal level is correct. Our arousal level, people think of arousal, they think of sex. Like, that's typically what they think. And when you think of the physiological responses as you would be preparing to have sex, essentially that's your arousal. And so that pregame feeling, all of that, understanding that, anxiety can both be positive and negative. Understanding how we feel with our anxiety, what type of anxiety is good, what type of anxiety is bad. Something with our quarterbacks that I make them do is identify what type of performer are they. Are they a high pressure performer, an anxiety-based performer, a perfectionist is the way that we all talk about it, where you're putting a ton of pressure on yourself? Or are you more like Drew Lock, who tended to just drift a little bit and not put that pressure on himself, but maybe he would get disengaged in the moment? Well, which one are you? Because you fall on one end of the spectrum. For Drew, we need to activate. So I need to be a little bit more difficult with myself. I need to, be very, very intentional about getting myself back into flow state. Essentially, think waking up on a very easy level. On the other side, I better have a breath pattern right. I better be able to slow myself down and really bring myself back to center, because any more thought on top of a perfectionist mentality or a hyper anxious performer will ultimately sink us even further in that direction. So really having somebody to mentor you on the way that you feel about things and ultimately educate you on things like I just shared.
Yeah. Is there something that you struggle with or like to improve about yourself personally? I mean, you mentioned a lot of stuff on the positive side. What's something that you're working on every day?
Yeah.
On you.
Yeah, 100%. The cop-out answer would be consistency. It's just, I am consistent, but we can all be more consistent. I would say peeling back the layers, still battling with insecurity. Still battling with insecurity that has been born through my athletic career, born through my childhood and adolescence, even some of it being passed down genetically. And so I know financially is a big one for me. I've met a couple different women in my life that I was in incredible relationships with that I think 95% of all men would have put a ring on it and that would have been it. For me, I was not fiscally where I want to be yet. And I struggle with that because that feeling alone is, creating a lot of negative stuff for myself rather than just accepting the fact that, look, dude, you don't have to be a millionaire. You don't have to have $700,000 cash in your bank account. Like, they're going to love you for you. And so really, really digging into that is a process that I'm still going through. I've been able to overcome a lot of the insecurity stuff that I have. I used to try to make things sound a lot better than they were. So I would end up telling, white lies and things. Like, I've corrected that. Like, I have been very honest with myself about that. But I would say that there are definitely insecurities still, especially fiscally, where, I struggle consistently and still struggle with it. And so I'm trying to grow more in tune with that voice. And that's difficult to do. There's hard conversations you have to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's a typical day like for you? Do you schedule and run your day? How do you do that so it doesn't run you essentially?
Yeah, 100%. I think I schedule every day and I schedule it down to the nth degree. I have the first hour of my morning is always the same hour. So that's going to stay the same. The first 30 minutes or the 30 minutes before I go to sleep is always going to stay the same. It's everything in between. Absolutely. I schedule it out, working for myself, like that is a luxury of it. But both a blessing and a curse because I want to help everybody, especially those walking in my shoes. And so as I have a schedule, let's say I have 8 hours of scheduled work, then I'm obviously going to do other work in between that will culminate in about 12 hours in the day. Now I have about 3 or 4 other hours that I have that's open where I'm not sleeping. And in those 3 to 4 hours, what I'm really struggling with and in my day-to-day is they end up getting consumed by phone calls, by me reaching out to people to help them based on things they've sent me. So that's part of, the irony of like, you have to serve yourself to serve others. And so I'm consistently trying to improve habitually with my schedule and understanding if I give away too much of my time, I have less time to give. And I think that that's something that I'm really working on. But as far as the day-to-day, I do what I love. I'm not rich by any means, but I don't need to be rich. And I'm very excited, both fiscally and as far as my purpose in the direction that I'm headed. And what I've noticed in the difference between that and other times in my life where I didn't have that alignment is it's very easy for me to wake up. It's very easy for me to go do the things that I have to do because I'm excited to do them. Whereas at other times in my life, it was, drudging and hard to do every single thing throughout that daily schedule. And I think that that's a byproduct of me listening to myself and ultimately having, the fortitude to take the leap and go that direction, even despite me giving up a 6-figure salary coaching quarterbacks in college football.
Yeah, well, as far as the finance goes, they say the bigger the impact that you're having on people, the bigger your income's going to grow right along with it. So that'll come, and it definitely sounds like you're on the right track with that.
Yeah.
So tell me about the business side of LockedIn QB. Are you doing it all yourself? Do you have a team that's helping you?
Yeah. So I have 2 people that I would say at the foundation are involved. One worked within the recruiting department at Missouri. He has built this whole website and is very in tune with the recruiting mission that I'm on, which is essentially to educate. They have all of these programs out there that are saying, I'm going to get you recruited here. That's all bullshit.
Yeah.
That's all bullshit. I was the person in charge of recruiting, getting 500 emails a day, and every single one of them was a favor to somebody who paid them, and I would delete the email right when I saw it. So that is a false world. So providing them direction within that space, I have help there, and he's very good at what he does. The other one is my brother. He's excellent within the quarterback space. So he's a professional quarterback right now in Germany. I am alone in a lot of the creative direction and vision behind what I'm doing. I have two others in the execution side of what I'm doing. And then just recently, Christian and Taj have joined what we're doing. And I know that their role is going to continue to grow as they feel more and more comfortable with the understanding of the ethos of what we're doing and the ultimate mission behind what we're doing, because both those guys are just as passionate as I am about what I'm doing. I just know, because they're like me, that they want to deeply understand it before they sprint forward with it. And so that's where we find ourselves now. But ultimately, I will be essentially creating an entire collegiate coaching staff that serves every single position across all of youth sports. And then we will have the mind piece intertwined into all of them. And they will be not from coaches, not from people who are taking your money, instead, former players who, like myself, are mission-oriented, mission-minded, that want to give back. And I think the authenticity and power in that is what's going to drive this thing to incredibly new levels, and just and change the way that young athletes see sports.
It's so cool. I'm excited to see where you go with it. What are the parallels, if any, that you've seen between playing quarterback and running a business?
Yeah, I think, everything. It's ultimate accountability. So as I get into entrepreneurship, it's between me and me. And at the end of the day, the results that I get are a direct byproduct and direct correlation to my habits and disciplines and the way that I live my life. I think the quarterback position is exactly the same. We can trick ourselves with 2 good games. We can get self-deprecating after 2 bad games. But ultimately, it's your ability to answer the bell day in, day out, and pursue your best in every realm of life. Because if you are not in full-blown effort for high achievement at the quarterback position in everything you do and being a true leader in society, you will struggle. And in entrepreneurship, I see the exact same correlation. Is if I falter in any area, I can't just do the things I want to do. I can't just focus on the things I'm not good at. I have to do all of it. And if I don't do all of it day in, day out, and answer the bell, the business falters. And the beautiful part is I have faltered, and I've gotten to see that in real time. And so it just builds even further conviction behind the process, which I think correlates to the quarterback position incredibly well.
So in just a few words, what does the term quarterback mean to you? You gave me just a pretty elaborate description there of both, but if you just had to give me 1, 2, or 3 words, what are the most important descriptors for the position of quarterback?
Self-aware, caring towards others, and discipline. Like, to me, those are the 3 words that stand out. As you look at the position itself, you have to continue to, at all times, have intentionality behind being better. And there is no halfway. There is no average. You will get exposed. You will 100% get exposed. So I think the quarterback position is the ultimate accountability stick, the ultimate measuring stick. And in that, you better love others and take care of others. You better be disciplined, and you better have that process in place that ultimately allows you to play well when the lights come on.
How many athletes are you currently working with right now?
Yeah, it's right around 18 in college. It's about 45 locally in this area where I'm training them, and then about high school and youth, and then working with about 15 to 20 other high school quarterbacks. I'll pass others like a ship in the night and help them at different times, responding to DMs constantly, trying to help kids from all across the country. The online program has been able to serve, we're serving at this point now thousands, but specifically me hands-on with those guys. I would say it's just south of 100, 100 people.
Well, Austyn, I mean, you've said so much, and it's really been, I think, impactful for our listeners. And I could talk to you all day and ask you 100 more questions, but I just got one or two more before I let you out of here.
Yeah.
What's the one takeaway for our listeners that you want to leave them with? If somebody's listening to this right now, maybe they're not even an athlete, but they want to reach their maximum potential, that they feel like they're not living up to everything that they think they can achieve. What's the one thing they can do right now to start themselves on that path?
Understand that societally, the technological world that we live in has us more connected to others than we've ever been before, yet often isolated. And so people have anxiousness inherently now. On average, kids born after the year of 2000 have the same levels of anxiety as a 1950s psychiatric patient. So as we look at that stat in and of itself, we have to form a level of acceptance in understanding that we're all flawed and it's not personally our fault. It's a result of what's going on around us. And if we can accept that, then my quote, you enter the cave. The cave you fear is the treasure, holds the treasures you seek. And for me, once you understand that it's okay how I feel, now ask yourself why you feel that way. And don't be afraid of what you discover, because your courage is ultimately going to allow you to discover things that are going to allow you to pass other people, if you want to look at it that way, or be fulfilled, which is the way that I look at it.
You mentioned at the beginning of this interview that you read, and that's kind of part of your program. Do you have one book recommendation?
Chop Wood, Carry Water by Joshua Medcalf. Yeah, it's only 115 pages, so everybody should feel very comfortable reading it. There's even a couple pictures in there, but it plays out like a movie as I read it. It's very, so often in the self-help industry and all these books I read, they're telling you things you can do to get better. This is something that's telling you things that you can do to get better and giving you real life, tangible examples through a sequential story that is beautiful, that makes it very, very easy to understand. And it essentially is the path to mastery, or the process of chasing our best self. And it takes you through everything. I mean, it legitimately takes you through damn near every experience that you have on this journey, or at least that I've discovered at 30 years old.
Give me the title and the author one more time. I'm gonna put that on my list.
Chop Wood, Carry Water by Joshua Medcalf.
Got it. All right, Austyn, where can people follow and connect with you and watch your journey?
Absolutely. LockedIn QB on Instagram. So LockedIn QB on Instagram is ultimately everything that's coming off of that right now, that is about to hit in the next 2 weeks, will be off of that platform. But this YouTube channel that I have will be going in the next 2 weeks as well. And that's what I would tap into. But LockedIn QB on Instagram, and then Austyn, AUSTYN CS_6 on both Instagram and Twitter are the places that I would go to connect with me. And one compliment I'll give myself is I'm very good about responding to almost everybody. So if somebody is, taken back by the messages in this or curious about something in this, I would love to have dialogue with them about it.
Awesome. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your being on the show. You're taking the time and putting so much thought into those answers. I think anybody that listens to this is going to have just a long list of things that they can take away and implement in their own life immediately. So thanks so much for what you're doing, and I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate it. And the questions, like I told you, those are intuitive and deep questions. So I know how your mind works too.